Okay, everyone, I think we're ready to start. Please note, following the Pledge of Allegiance, please remain standing for a moment of silence in memory of Francie Fuller, who passed away on June 10th. Ms. Fuller served 15 years on the East Penn School Board of School Directors from 2001 to 2016, serving one term as president. I'll now call to order the June 14th meeting of the East Penn Board of School Directors. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The first order of business is request to address the board, and we have none. So moving forward, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the May 24th meeting minutes.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Do this by a voice vote. We'll do this by a voice vote again. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next, we have a district update. Mrs. Campbell.
Good evening and welcome back to our in-person meetings. It's great to see everyone here as opposed to seeing you on Zoom. I'll start off with some announcements about our weekend food program. We are very fortunate and appreciative of our partnership with the Rotary. And throughout the entire school year, our Rotary has been preparing backpack food program for families throughout the school district. And we're excited to share that the Rotary will continue that weekend food program throughout the summer as well. In addition, they will also be doing a summer lunch program. And so we encourage families to please check out our website for times and locations for those programs. I'd also like to congratulate Emmaus High School student Hayden Schmidt on earning a gold medal in the 2020-21 National German Exam Level 3. I'll start off first by saying Hayden Schmidt is probably a name that's familiar to many of our board members. Hayden is the young man several years ago. He and his brothers joined us at a school board meeting, and we congratulated them for earning a patent on their electronic circuit breaker ID system. And so he being Hayden, has certainly continued his scholarly accomplishments by earning that national recognition on a German exam, which is administered to over 20,000 high school students nationally. I'm also excited to share that the East Penn Education Foundation, which throughout the school year this year, we've highlighted the many creative ways in which they continue to support students of the East Penn School District, most recently including the therapy dog program. But the East Penn Foundation is sponsoring the first annual foundation golf outing, which is planned for October 4th. So we encourage our community to please check out our district website, look for the link to find out more about the golf outing. A final congratulations goes out to our spring athletes. And I want to recognize that they had not only an outstanding athletic season, but they also had a great season as sportsmen. In particular, boys lacrosse were the district champs, and the team and coach were the recipient of the Sportsmanship Award, which is voted on by all Lehigh Valley game officials. Boys volleyball was EPC champs, and again, that team was also, and their coaches were the recipients of the Sportsmanship Award. And finally, our baseball team was the EPC and district champs. If you've not yet had an opportunity to do so, please visit the high school website and find the link to the Emmaus High School virtual art show. The art show is one of those annual events that really has been celebrated by our community and is a great showing of the talents of the students of Emmaus High School. And while we were not able to facilitate an in-person event this year, our students did a fantastic job creating an online presence for their work. On that note, while there were many events that we facilitated virtually this year, we're very fortunate that we were able to have 2 in-person celebrations as we wrap up the 2021 school year. Specifically, last week, the district recognized 13 of our district retirees at our annual East Penn retirement dinner. And it was a wonderful way for us to honor the careers of staff members who devoted many, many years, decades of their compassionate service to our school community. A special thanks to Laura Grove for organizing the event, and also to Dr. Bacher and Mr. Bird for representing our school board at that evening as well. In addition to our retirement celebration, yesterday we honored our 2021 EHS graduates with an in-person ceremony at PPL. Certainly, if you would have asked me 6 months ago, I would have thought that event would have been possible, I was pretty skeptical. However, and you can appreciate, to plan and facilitate an event for over 700 graduates is no simple task. So again, I want to recognize the work of Dr. Kires and her administrative team, Mrs. George, Mr. Spangler, all of our Emmaus High School administration and staff who planned for a safe, enjoyable, and truly a dignified ceremony. I also want to thank, again, many of our administrative team members who were present and celebrated with us yesterday. And it was amazing to have all 9 of our board members in attendance with us as well. And finally, I also want to recognize the collaborative accomplishments and efforts of the class of 2021 and their families for their respectful participation in the ceremony. It's amazing to believe that despite the remarkable challenges that we face this year, we were able to facilitate and celebrate in a single in-person event. The ceremony, from many people's perspectives, was seamless and truly a wonderful celebration of our senior class and their accomplishments. Today, as you all know, was the last day of school for East Penn students for the 2021 school year. And yes, there are many reasons for us to be excited to put this school year behind us. But there are also many things that came out of this year that I think we can celebrate. In August of 2020, as we were on the brink of opening our elementary schools for hybrid instruction and on the brink of opening our secondary schools for remote instruction, I asked the community to work with us and to exhibit patience, kindness, and support as we work to safely reopen all of our schools. I challenged our community to model strength, resilience, and perseverance. And as always, East Penn rose to the occasion, and we did just that. I truly appreciate the frustrations that our students and our parents and families experienced as we often closed schools due to COVID cases. I too became frustrated by the number of communications regarding cases that we were having, and we were disappointed by those cases, of course. However, in the end, because of your support for our schools and your diligence in helping us to adhere to those COVID-19 protocol, we were able to safely reopen 9 of our 10 buildings for 5-day-a-week in-person instruction since April. And that's a remarkable accomplishment, and one that we could not have done without the collaborative efforts of our students, our staff, and our parents. We wish our school community a safe and relaxing summer. And as the state is requiring a health and safety plan moving into next school year, our administrative team certainly will bring that information to the board and the community as we continue to meet throughout the summer. And I have a final update for the board as well. And this specifically relates to previous conversations or discussions that the board has had with regard to the format of its board meetings. And again, we're celebrating and appreciative of the fact that we can be together in person again. And we also recognize that there is a desire to continue to offer remote options for those families who prefer to connect with the school board in that format. And as our administration said we would do, we investigated options so that we can appropriately live stream our school board meetings. And so we have worked with a technician from a local vendor and have proposals for the necessary upgrades that would need to occur to the sound system in this particular room. Specifically, we're looking to update from a VGA to HDMI specifically for the sound. And then we would have a standalone presentation monitor that would allow the school board as well as administration to clearly see the presentations and not necessarily have to move when the presentation is displayed on the screen behind us right now. So I have shared the approximate costs with the school board, and certainly would appreciate any feedback from the board during this portion of the meeting in terms of if there is any feedback in terms of moving forward so that we would be able to continue in person as well as live streaming with an opportunity for families to participate remotely as well. And that's my update for this evening. Thank you.
Can you share where the monitor would go, the presentation monitor?
There's a question about specific placement of the presentation monitor. Sorry, Dr. Manzo, I was looking for you.
It would be right here in the middle. So these power cords would be covered up. That would allow all of you to be able to see around this area, the presentations, instead of having to move out of the way. It could also be used in different settings when we have other sessions in these rooms. So when we're doing leadership sessions, or if we have families and communities coming in, they could use it in that way too. So it can be moved around.
Okay, so it wouldn't be obstructing
No.
the view and,
No.
okay.
That's the whole purpose of it, is really, right now when this drops down, that monitor does really obstruct all of your view, or you would have to look at side monitors, and this allows for you to stay where you are.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments for Mrs. Campbell on her report? Dr. Levinson?
I would just like to say I support the option that's being recommended by the administration. I think it's a good plan. Look forward to having that option available to the public in sometime next month, I'll say.
Anyone else? I'll also say I support the plan with the monitor option.
Great.
Dr. Munson?
Yeah, I agree. I'm also supportive of it. I actually just wanted to do one follow-up on the comments about the graduation. For those that weren't there, for me, one of the themes that I heard from the students, both informally and then certainly on stage, was resiliency in particular. And one of the things that was really impressive to me was how much more even-keeled and resilient the students sounded, and the way they expressed their thoughts, than we've seen from sometimes adults in the community. And I really appreciated that. And I actually, it gave me, there's so much criticism of young people today, but it gave me a lot of hope that they recognize just how disruptive this has been and how much they've lost. But they also recognize what it's given them, and that they are resilient. So I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Munson. Any other comments or concerns? Okay. Moving on to the budget, we have a budget update. Mrs. Campbell and Mr. Saul?
We do. As Mr. Saul transitions and begins to prepare the presentation that will likely come up behind us and we'll need to move, but not in the future, I just want to briefly provide a little bit of background and some context in terms of how we got to where we are right now with regard to the budget. As we have so very often described, the budget really is a process, and one that evolves over time. And you might recall in January of 2021, about 6 months ago, Mr. Saul and I began, in representation of our administrative team, began the formal budget presentations with an overview of the 2021-22 preliminary budget, And at that time in January, the proposed tax increase for East Penn was 3.6%, which was the adjusted Act 1 index. Throughout the course of January, I should say since January, leading up to this evening, our administration shared 8 different budget presentations, each focused on a specific area of the budget, including expenditures, revenues, district priorities, the long-range and capital plan, as well as giving the board and the community a high-level sense of our future district priorities past next school year. As a reminder, as we emerge from the pandemic and the accompanying uncertain financial landscape, our focus in East Penn has been on restoring educational programs and positions that had been cut for financial reasons, while also being mindful, moving forward, of the future organizational needs, and of course, always keeping our eye and attention to the long-term financial health of the organization. Over the course of several months, as the financial landscape has come into greater focus for us, we've been able to update our revenues and our expenditures and have provided that summary for the board and the community. And tonight, Mr. Saul is, I know he's excited to wrap up the budget development process, and he will share with you this evening. You'll hear that the budget at this point includes a 2.7% tax increase, so we're certainly proud of our administrative team's work and Mr. Saul and his team's work in terms of reducing that tax increase. And at this point, I will now allow Mr. Saul to take over and again share that high-level summary in terms of where we're at with the final budget.
Great, thank you.
Link to change
Coming up.
See it. There we go. So this will be a relatively short presentation. I'll probably repeat a little bit of what Mrs. Campbell said, but I'll try not to repeat too much of it. As she said, we began the budget process really internally late in 2020 and started presenting to the board in January and have made many presentations over the last 6 months. On May 10th, the board took action to approve the proposed final budget. And at this point, we have met all of the legal requirements for passing a final budget. So we are here to see the final budget and consider approval this evening. First, I'd like to take a few minutes to review in detail the changes that have occurred from the proposed final budget to the budget that we have presented for adoption this evening. It's sort of grueling to go through the process, but I think it's important in terms of transparency for the board to see those changes and also for the public to have the opportunity to see the changes that were made. Following that, I'd just like to offer a few highlights regarding the final budget, just touching on some points that we've talked about along the way, but it's important to recap. These first 3 slides that I'll review are screen clips or excerpts from the proposed final budget documents. You can have that. If you look at pages 34, 35, and 36, you'll find these changes in there. I just wanted to put them on the screen for ease of reference and we can see them easier. We updated our evaluation of the current year and our estimated ending fund balance. And we have an estimated additional $48,000 in savings, which would increase the ending fund balance. That's primarily related to the items we see on the screen. Again, I'll touch on those in terms of local revenues, additional real estate taxes. We use the correct terminology. Revising the estimated revenue from local real estate taxes, as well as interim taxes, fees that the district collects, and as well as other miscellaneous revenues. In terms of the state, it's the Social Security and retirement, which is related to staff wages. We talk about that frequently, how they're interrelated, as well as an additional $150,000 we received in special education contingency funding. The federal item is just an updated projection based on revised federal allocations we received toward the end of the year that usually accompany our allocations that we receive for the next year. In the area of salaries, it actually an increase in anticipated expenditures related to substitute salaries toward the latter part of the year. And related to that would be the benefits, the FICA, retirement, and then a little bit in terms of medical. Again, medical becomes a moving target because of people who are maybe on leave, on an uncompensated leave, their medical benefits drop, they come back on. And so we generally are using a real-time snapshot in terms of medical. And so we see some changes, and we've talked about those in the past. In terms of district-wide instructional services, this is primarily projects that we had anticipated that either came in under budget or that we weren't able to finish this year and said, okay, well, we can plan on not spending $65,000. And then finally, the district-wide non-instructional. This is related to receipts that we received in the past. Specifically, this one was our Commonwealth instructional subsidy. We had a deduction from that related to lost instructional time. It's a lost instructional time penalty which we incur almost annually related to our seniors and the timing of graduation. So that is the revised estimates for the current year. Looking forward to the 21-22 budget in terms of revenues. These are all pretty straightforward, but I'll touch on them briefly. The real estate tax assessments, we had an increase in estimated assessments from the prior month, really from the April report we received from the county until the May report that we received from the county. As Mrs. Campbell said, we were able to reduce the tax increase to 2.7%. The Social Security and retirement, again, they're related to the reduction here is related to the reduction in wages, which we'll see on the expenditure side. Advertising revenue, that's related to the printed district calendar that's put together and distributed. We do get some advertising revenue to help offset the expense for the calendar. The federal program revenues are related to the title programs, specifically Title I, Title II, and Title IV. You can see that there's actually a relatively nice increase in those revenues for next year related to those federal programs. We will see those on the expenditure side because federal revenues are one of those things that what comes in, we spend specifically as program expenditures related to those revenues. And then finally, we did incorporate the ESSER II and ESSER III funds. And I specifically kept them out until this point because it's dollars in, dollars out. So we'll see this expenditure, or we'll see this an equal expenditure on the expenditure side. And I'll have that broken, I'll touch on that in a minute in terms of how it's broken down. But essentially, we wanted to recognize the fact that we would be receiving federal funds, ESSER II and ESSER III, and we would be spending those. On the expenditure side, we had a reduction in wages and benefits. We talked about this as specifically related to the retirements we received and adjusting our assumptions for the cost of wages and benefits in the following year. The federal program expenditures we talked about on the revenue side. Property insurance, slight adjustment from the estimates we had made. And then budgetary reserve was adjusted so that it would be at that 5% mark. Again, I'll remind the board that while it's recorded as an expenditure, we reverse budgetary reserve sort of before we get to the bottom line. So we could increase that $10 million and the bottom line would remain the same because we're increasing it just to hit that 5% mark, but it's actually backed out before the bottom line. As I mentioned, the ESSER II and ESSER III revenues were added, and here you can see the expenditures. And I broke out the expenditures for ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. It didn't combine the wages and benefits. You could see that piece by itself, and you could verify that, yes, the revenues are equaling the expenditures. So again, the number of changes were relatively small from the adoption of the proposed final budget to the budget that we're presenting this evening for final adoption. Some highlights regarding the budget, and I apologize if this is a little blurry on the screen. I did want to highlight for the board that, as Mrs. Campbell said, the Act 1 index was 3.6%. This budget includes a 2.7% tax increase. Over a 5-year period, that comes out to an average of 1.55% increase, and over a 10-year period, 1.85% increase. And if you look up the inflation rate, it actually comes in slightly under the inflation rate. A question I'm often asked related to the budget from the community is, what does this mean to me as a taxpayer in terms of the tax increase? Well, we receive information from the county assessment office, and we're able to calculate what the, quote, average home is, the value of the average home, which is, you can see on here, $212,500 and some change. What that tax increase would mean to that homeowner is an additional $105 or $106, and I apologize because mine on my page is blurry as well. But roughly, we'll call it $106 in terms of tax increase for next year. And then again, this is from the long-range plan, so you recognize this, but you could use this chart to determine what that impact would be to any, really any level of home value. We wanted to recap very briefly for the board the items that were restored in the budget: 1 elementary, 1 secondary teaching position, the summer maintenance and technology staff. Recall that this is a somewhat scaled down program from pre-pandemic times. Again, sort of based on the needs for this summer. We do anticipate that next year at this time, we would be restoring the remainder of that to restore that program fully, but that is a scaled down program. The building and department budgets, and finally the SEL program. With regard to the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds, just to inform the board of what was included, ESSER 2 is an allocation of $2.7 million. The entire amount was included in the 21-22 budget, and ESSER 3 is an allocation of $5.6 million, and 50% of that was included in the 21-22 budget, allowing the remaining 50% to be used in the following year. And when we had the presentations regarding the remediation, we talked about the fact that those funds would be used over a period of time. So again, will exactly 50% be used? Actually, we don't know that yet. But at least we're recognizing 50% of the ESSER 3. And the fact is, we really have a 3-year period to use those. So we actually may extend that out even farther. But based on what we know today, these are the assumptions we put in the budget. Finally, I did want to remind the board that along the way, we had built in, if you will, a structural deficit of a little under $1 million. That structural deficit is still there. I can tell you on behalf of the administration, we're not overly concerned it's there. We need to be mindful of it. We don't want that to grow in future budgets. In fact, we maintain that or reduce that in the future. Again, the individual circumstances year to year will dictate where we're comfortable with that. But with regard to this budget, I think it's a well-balanced budget when you look at all of the competing interests in the budget, the needs of the district, the ability of the community to pay, if the how good your bond rating will be based on it. When you look at all the competing factors, I think it's a well-developed budget. We spent a lot of time talking about all the factors, and the fund balance would be a little over 8%, which is a fair number when you consider the funds that we have set aside into the capital reserve fund. So with that really is a highlight of the current budget, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Champagne.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Saul. As always, very thorough and helpful presentation. Just, I want to make sure I understand one thing. When you added the ESSER funds in, you added it both on the revenue and the expense side.
Right.
And then the thing that struck me is that the budgetary reserve went up by about 600 and some odd $1,000 because of that. But if you back those out, would you get the same bottom line, same structural deficit, and same budgetary reserve?
You get the same structural deficit, yes.
Okay, so they really don't have any impact on how the tax increase or decrease was calculated. It only impacts the structural deficit, and it does impact the budgetary reserve, which I find a little odd, because I would have thought it would just be you really shouldn't even count that they're there. They're there, but they're not. It should not, the budgetary reserve shouldn't go up because of those funds. That's my one concern, that shouldn't have happened. It should have been 5% of everything but those ESSER 2 and ESSER 1 funds. So by doing that, would that then make a difference in how your structural deficit?
No, that wouldn't have affected the structural deficit. I recognize what you're saying. I mean, it would have been, let's call it 4.75% budgetary reserve based on all expenditures, which certainly, again, that's possible. The benchmark has been 5%, so I increased it to 5%. But to answer the question, it would not impact the structural deficit, because whatever's put in as budgetary reserve in total is backed out before you get to that structural deficit.
Right, and that's the way I kind of did the math when I looked at it. But I'm just, to me, those funds are not, they're once and done kind of funds. I don't anticipate they're going to see them again, so I guess I would have not wanted to see them kind of commingled with other monies that are ongoing and how we calculate the budgetary reserve, because it should be just 5% of those, in my mind, of those expenditures that we are actually on an ongoing basis going to see.
Sure.
Thank you.
Again, just for the board's benefit, if we had not increased the budgetary reserve, all of the numbers in terms of structural deficit, tax increase would still be the same. It's just that budgetary reserve line item would be call it 4.75 maybe instead of 5%. So I appreciate the comment. It's a matter of how you look at it, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Byrd?
Yes, I have one question. You mentioned a special educational contingency from the state. How do we get that, and is that something we can look at forward, or just a one-time situation?
The special education contingency funds are application-based, and our special education department and Dr. Pekarik applies for them each year. We actually have been very fortunate over the past several years. If you look in the long-range plan, you can see the 5-year history. You can see we've received them. I think there was 1 year in there that was lower than the $150,000, but it's not a foregone conclusion. It's not given that you're going to receive them every year. So if you look, we did not budget them, for instance, for next year because it's not guaranteed funds. We would need to apply, and we would, need to be awarded those funds.
Thank you.
Dr. Munson?
Yes, thank you. And thanks, as always, for such detailed and clear descriptions of what is happening. I have a question first about the ESSER funds. So now that they're in the budget, as I understand your presentation, they're in as 5.6 million on the revenue side, and then also that equivalent amount on the expenditure side. But of that, almost 2.2 million is listed as unallocated. So, number one, how does that work in terms of, like, where does that money sit? Like, because if we haven't allocated it, do we actually have the money, or would we have to spend the money and apply to be reimbursed? I mean, where will that money exist?
Here, let me try to untangle that for you. I listed it as unallocated. It's actually sitting in the budget in a supply line item. It's a very basic sort of place to set it in the budget. I listed it as unallocated because we haven't specifically said we're using it for remediation program, a purchase remediation program, staff wages, transportation. So I just, in order to get the revenues and expenditures to balance, put it in an expenditure line item, which would then allow us during the year to transfer that through a budgetary transfer to the place where it needs to be.
Okay.
And that's really related to the fact that at this point, 100% of the plans for those funds for the next 12 months it's not complete. So that's why it's listed that way.
But and to go to the sort of the following slide then, of that 5 points, that 2.2 million that's unallocated, while you don't know exactly how it's going to be spent, you're anticipating that it won't be spent until the following year, correct? So,
No, and I apologize if I was confusing on the later slides. We're assuming, at this point, we're assuming that the 2.2 million, how about I just pull it up on the screen? I think we're referencing this one. So
Yeah.
the 2.2 million unallocated is included with all of those items to total the 5.6.
right,
So there's 5.6 in revenues, 5.6 in expenditures. Where I may have caused some confusion was on this slide.
yes,
where-
this is where I got confused.
Okay. So ESSER 2, the top half of the slide,
Right,
that grant allocation is 2.7 million. Okay? Next line right under that.
I see,
2.7
okay.
million is included in the budget.
Okay.
For the bottom half, that's the ARP ESSER 3 funds. The allocation is 5.6 million. There's only 2.8 million or half of
okay.
that.
Okay, so this the 2.2 in unallocated ESSER funds, you actually do expect to expend in this coming budget year, and then you've got an additional 2.8 million of ESSER funds that you're sort of holding in reserve for the following year that do not exist on the budget books.
That's correct.
Okay, great. So my other question, which I am almost sure that you explained well in the past, and now I just need you to refresh my memory. It's just where the main sort of catch-up occurs so that we shouldn't be too worried about the $1 million structural deficit. I know part of it was the lagged transportation reimbursement, but I know that also changed a little bit. So can you say a little bit more about why you're not particularly concerned about that?
Sure. It has to do with the revenue assumptions for 21, 22. And I like to use the words being conservative, but that can mean a lot of things, I guess. And being conservatively low in those being, let's say, restored, those returning to quote normal. So there's some ability for those to actually be better than what we've estimated, which really offsets that structural deficit
Right.
at this point.
Okay. And so then how, I mean, I guess the thing, that I was trying to figure out is in the long-range fiscal plan, the difference between that structural deficit, I don't know if you have it on the screen, but it's on line, the structural deficit's listed on line, I guess it's row 30 of the spreadsheet, page 5 of the long-range fiscal plan. So that's $971,000. The following year projections are a positive 412. So that's a recovery of over $1 million. But I couldn't back out that amount just looking at the difference between the 2021 proposed and the 2022 projected. I understand the math works, but I'm trying to understand substantively where those assumptions help so that there's such a big swing. Am I being clear on my question or not?
Yeah, I'm trying to process your question. I think I understand it.
Let me take another stab at it.
Okay.
Between the $971,000 deficit and then the $412,000 surplus, where's most of the action in those two columns that produce that swing?
Yeah, and I'm trying, excuse me, I apologize. I'm trying to remember back, because it's been a while, as you said, since we talked about
Yeah.
these. So part of it is I think when you look at the local revenue, there's a significant increase there. Based on the assumption, this may be unrelated to, does not support the answer to your question, but, based on the assumption of a 3.5% tax increase and assessment growth for next year. So again, it's in the revenue assumptions.
I see. Okay, good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought about the fact that the assumptions about the taxes is built into that as well. Okay. Okay, thank you.
And those tax assumptions are at the at the projected Act 1
Right.
index.
Right.
So again, they may be higher than reality will dictate.
Right. Thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Bowman?
Thank you. I just have a few things that I need to have my memory refreshed on because this process goes on long enough that I know these things were all said before, but I don't remember. The two teachers, secondary, is that teacher the reading teacher? Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. And then can you remind me what the elementary teacher is doing?
The elementary teacher, I'm going to use the word placeholder. We do not have that particular position allocated to any one elementary building or grade level just yet.
Okay.
But what we continue to do is we monitor the number of students who had been remote, and we're optimistic that they're going to be returning to us for in-person instruction, and we're also continuing to monitor kindergarten registration.
Okay.
And so those are two of the main factors that we continue to keep an eye on.
And we are still down on the elementary level. Once we hire that person, how many teachers will we be down?
Mr. Povolitis, is it one other? One. Okay, yeah.
Okay.
We reduced 2 last year.
Okay, thank you. And then this budget, I think I know the answer to this. I just want to make sure I know. Fully funds the tax relief program, is that correct? Is that
That's
still true?
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the last thing is there anything that would affect the budget, for example, I know we are among many districts that are in the process of trying to hire a lot of full-time subs at once. In the event that we can't hire the number of people and the contingency plans that you have in place for that, is there anything there that would affect the money spent in this budget, or would it still all be the same federal government funds that you would use to pay for those contingencies?
Yeah, I think the contingencies, you're exactly right. The contingencies would be funded just as the plans are being funded by the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds. If, for instance, one of the contingencies was raising the sub rate, let's say double it, just hypothetically, obviously the dollars would not go as far.
Okay.
But with $8 million in federal subsidy monies, clearly we'll be able to fund whatever program this year and again, hopefully next year as well.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bowman. Are there any other questions, comments? Well, I just also, again, like to add my appreciation for your very detailed and explanations and work product. I especially find the long-range plan to be helpful in seeing how this budget fits into the longer-term goals of the district, and that's been a very helpful development during your tenure here, so I appreciate that.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, I would like to take items B through D, since all the budget items are related. If there are no objections, I'd like to take them all together. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Byrd?
Aye.
Mr. Champagne?
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski? Dr. Levinson?
Aye.
Dr. Munson?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Winch?
Aye.
Ms. Bowman?
Aye.
Dr. Bacher?
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion's pass. Moving on to personnel, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the personnel exhibit, the revised exhibit.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments? Dr. Levinson?
I have a quick question. I noticed that there are a lot of new staff appointments. Are these related to, I guess, the substitute appointments for we're doing in the fall?
Absolutely. So I appreciate you asking that question, Dr. Levinson, because it gives us an opportunity to really commend the work of Mr. Hinkle, Mr. Povolitis, Ms. Whitman, as well as all of our building principals in getting moving as quickly as possible on those recruitment efforts.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions or comments? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Champagne,
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski,
Aye.
Dr. Levinson,
Aye.
Dr. Munson,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Winch,
Aye.
Ms. Bowman,
Aye.
Mr. Byrd,
Aye.
Dr. Bacher.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes, and I think Mrs. Campbell has some comments.
Yes, thank you. In particular, on this particular agenda, we have the retirements of two incredibly valued individuals who are retiring from the organization. In particular, Mrs. Rita Cortez certainly is someone who I know that our board knows knows quite well just from her work in leading our vocal music program. Ms. Cortez has been an employee of East Penn for 24 years, including many years at Lower Macungie Middle School from 1997 to 2004. And then the most recent, I should say the last 17 years of her career have been at Emmaus High School. And she has been the leader of our music department, serves as the department chair, certainly teaches many of our vocal classes, and then also leads several select musical ensembles. We recognize that Emmaus High School has an outstanding reputation for its musical program. However, I will say that Ms. Cortez certainly took that program and helped it to grow and expanded it probably to a whole new level. Under her leadership, our Emmaus High School students, our vocal groups have performed at many famous local landmarks and even international landmarks. In particular, our ensembles have traveled and performed at Carnegie Hall, St. Patrick's Cathedral. As part of Chorale's Italy tours, they performed at the Sistine Chapel, the Vatican, and have even sung on the Swiss Alps. So literally talk about amazing learning experiences for our Emmaus High School students under her leadership. The other individual who is retiring from the organization is Ms. Michelle James. She has 27 years with East Penn. Her career began as an elementary teacher at Macungie, and then she also served as an instructional support teacher at Wescosville Elementary. For about 4 years, Michelle was also one of our literacy coaches in the district. And for the past 8 years, I've had the pleasure of working very closely with Michelle. She served as one of our curriculum supervisors. And she and I have worked very closely, and it's through her work that she's really had a significant impact on our elementary program, including full-day kindergarten, our elementary report card, our math program, and even just recently, our work with social and emotional learning. And I can say without a doubt, I've said this before in our organization, and you see that we work really hard to fill and replace positions, and certainly we will work to do that. But I know without a doubt that we will not be able to replace the quality of those two individuals. So I just wanted to express my gratitude to both Rita and Michelle and congratulate them on stellar careers and wish them continued success as they move on to the next phase in their career and their life journeys. I also, again, just as individuals move on to new experiences, we're very fortunate that Mr. Hinkle has has made the decision to move on as our new human resource director, which left a huge void as principal of Jefferson Elementary School. And so the board also just approved our new principal, Mr. Sam Hafner, who is joining us this evening. Sam comes to us with 22 years in education. Some of those, 8 of those years, he began as a teacher, actually in Las Vegas, and then also came to Pennsylvania and has been a middle school teacher as well as an assistant principal and at the middle level. And then the last 13 years of his career have been as an elementary principal in the Southern Lehigh School District. In addition to his outstanding experiences as a teacher and a school leader, Sam brings a passion and commitment to community and building school culture that probably is unlike any other candidate we've ever experienced. And so we are super fortunate that he has chosen to continue his leadership journey with us here in East Penn. And I know he'll be a great asset to our already strong elementary team and will be welcomed with open arms by the Jefferson community. So Sam, thank you again. Congratulations. And we look forward to having you continue with us.
Thank you very much, and I'm excited to get started. Part of the East Penn and Jefferson family, so thank you.
Great. And I'll also comment that Sam is a resident of our district, and so I know that he has students who are a part of our system, and so we're, again, fortunate to have you here.
Normally, we would invite you up to shake everyone's hand, but under the circumstances, we'll give you congratulations. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Campbell. Moving on to operations. If there are no objections, I'll entertain a motion for taking items A through D together.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
There's a-
Sorry. Oh, Dr. Levinson,
Yeah, I
sorry.
do have a quick question regarding the facility study that's going to be performed by KCBA Architects. I have no doubt that our internal team, properly vetted the architects and they have a very good reputation in terms of what they do. But I was struck by the cost of the study being, only about $18,000. And for myself, looking at the number, knowing that, we have 10 buildings in the district and the level of detail that's going to be required in order for us to extract from enough information to know how we're going to proceed with capital expenditures and whatnot. So I just like if somebody could comment, I guess the full scope of what this facility study covers, and to ensure that what this cost is properly covers all the hundreds of hours that I'm sure is going to be involved for looking at this study, and maybe explain where that price is coming from.
You're concerned we're not being charged enough for
Well,
for what we're for the scope of the project?
Right, I should preface that I'm happy that we're only going to pay for what we're paying for such an extent, but I would like to understand why it's only $18,000.
Mr. Onishko, I'm not sure if you would like to maybe lead off with a general overview in terms of the scope of the work. And then I do know that we're also very fortunate to have representatives from KCBA who I don't know if you're able to speak to the question about the cost relative to the scope of the work, but however you want to handle that.
So as far as the scope of the work, for the $18,000, I mean, yes, there are 10 schools that are looking at the facilities, but they're also going into the programs that the school district is looking into. How does it affect the special needs program that we have? Do we have facilities to support the arts program, the athletic program? And it'll keep going down the road. So it's not just the infrastructure that we're looking at, but we are looking at a full, broad range of how it will affect the district going forward 5 to 10 years from now, and will it support the student population, what both the community, the students, and the staff members need. As far as the fees go, I can't let Jim speak to that, but when we looked at the facilities programs that were presented to us, the RFPs, there was a wide variety of pricing in the fees. It went anywhere from $153,000 down to, I think, maybe $12,000. And some of those fees, some of the architectural firms do it because they are looking for maybe possibly getting, when they complete it, they might find a solution that might include adding onto a building. And if they're lucky enough to be the architect that we would choose, they might be able to get some of those fees recuperated. That is not always the case. So there was a wide variety, and we did not base it on fees alone. We based it on who we thought would be the best partner for East Penn School District.
Yeah, a little bit about the fee. Like you just explained, you'll see a wide range in fees for these type of studies. It's really not a money generator for our company. It's more of a marketing effort. We will spend hundreds and hundreds of hours doing an in-depth study for you. It's not just the architects. We also have hired a mechanical, electrical, plumbing consultant. They're going to be going through your buildings exhaustively, looking at all the systems and giving us full reports on those. We have a civil engineer that we've hired that's also going to look at all the sites and site issues, stormwater management, things of that nature. And we've also hired a kitchen consultant to look at your kitchens. So the fee gets broken down into a bunch of pieces. We do have to pay all those people to do the study. But what we really try to give you is value. We do a very exhaustive study of your buildings. We do an in-depth study of your program. We really want to understand educationally where you are and where you want to be. And then how do your facilities tie those two things together? How do your facilities match your educational program? That's a lot of meetings. You know, we're going to kick off real soon next week with the administrators and really get a big picture of what's going on. We're going to meet with principals, curriculum directors. We'll even meet with the students. We'll meet with the teachers. We'll meet with whoever you think is important to get the information we need. We really don't put a limit on that. And then the other part of that is there's a lot of meetings that might come out of this where we have to come to the school board and present our findings. Or we're going to have a community meeting where we explain it to the community. Here's what we found. Here's why we're recommending X, Y, or Z. So there's a lot of time that goes into these studies, but it's really to set you guys up for making good decisions for the next 5 to 10 years. So it's really about the value that you're getting out of that $18,000.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
Any other comments or questions? Mr. Champagne?
Yeah, having sat in on the sessions and just, was very impressed with the KCBA team. I think we've got a quality group of people to help support us. I did speak with David Hine, who's a director at the Parkland School District, and got glowing recommendations on KCBA. So I'm very enthusiastic about the work product we're going to get and the level of service we're going to get, along with the work that Mr. Anusko and his team did. I think we're in good hands.
Thank you. We're real excited to kick off the study with you guys.
Any other comments? No, I just have to say I appreciated having the references in the drawing because it seemed like a very thorough report, and then on top of that, hearing positive references is very comforting for embarking on this. So thank you. There are no further comments or questions. Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Jankowski,
Aye.
Dr. Levinson,
Aye.
Dr. Munson,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Winch,
Aye.
Ms. Bowman,
Aye.
Mr. Byrd,
Aye.
Mr. Champagne,
Aye.
Dr. Bacher.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion's pass. Thank you also for attending our meeting to answer questions. You're free to stay for the end, but we understand if you have other things to, and want to head out. Moving on to educational conference, may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Are there any comments or questions? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Dr. Levinson,
Aye.
Dr. Munson,
Aye.
Mr. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Winch,
Aye.
Ms. Bowman,
Aye.
Mr. Byrd,
Aye.
Mr. Champagne,
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski,
Aye.
Dr. Bacher.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Motion passes. Moving on to appointment of voting delegates. I did not see anyone, I didn't have a chance to check my email before the meeting, right before the meeting. Anyone sending an email before? I don't know if you got any, so,
Mr. Champagne had indicated he might be interested.
okay. Are there any other people that are interested in being delegates?
I'll say that I'm interested, but I did it last year, so if there's somebody else that would like the
Okay.
opportunity, I'm more than happy to step.
Same, because I wasn't done it the last couple of years, so.
We have 3 that we can,
I'm interested also. I did it also last year. Be interested. Anybody else want, I would back out.
okay. Are there any new faces that are interested?
I might be, just only virtually though. I wouldn't be able to attend the actual conference, the assembly, in person. So if somebody wanted to attend in person, I wouldn't want to take their slot.
I don't know, the rest of the,
I only can report 3 of
3.
the delegates, but anybody's, because of being virtual, anyone then can watch it. It's just about, you wouldn't have the ability to vote and
okay, so
legislative
you're saying that he could attend virtually even if we have 3 other
I believe
delegates?
so. I'll double check that, but I believe the way that they're running that, yes.
Okay,
But we can, I have to report 3 delegates to them.
okay. So it sounds like we should,
I'll step aside, that's fine. I was,
well, he was not going to be in person. He was not able to do it in person.
well, it's all virtual.
I was going to be virtual as well.
It's all virtual. The conference is in person, but the assembly is all virtual.
Yeah.
But only the 3 elected delegates that I report to the PSBA
Okay.
are the only ones that can vote on anything or be on the legislative platform.
Okay, so you'll take Mr. Champagne's spot?
Yeah, because I talked to Ms. Allen about going to the conference, but not, I
Okay.
don't care if the assembly's, I've done it.
Okay, so we'll entertain a motion with the appointees being Dr. Levinson, Mr. Byrd, and Mr. Smith.
So moved.
Second?
Is there any discussion? Mrs. Allen, will you call the roll, please?
Dr. Munson. Dr. Munson.
I'm sorry, aye.
Mr.
Needed to have
Smith.
some suspense.
Yeah, I was negotiating.
Ms. Winch.
Aye.
Ms. Bowman.
Aye.
Mr. Byrd.
Aye.
Mr. Champagne.
Aye.
Mr. Jankowski.
Aye.
Dr. Levinson.
Aye.
Dr. Bacher.
Aye.
9 ayes.
He was unmuting himself.
What's that?
He was unmuting himself, that's all he was doing.
Motion passes.
Still zooming.
Moving on to other educational entities. Mr. Champagne, do you have a
Yes, I do.
report for LCTI?
We had a virtual meeting on May 26th. A couple of things. There was a special recognition of the co-op students, and especially Owen Mitchler, who was our May student representative, but he's also one of the honorees of the co-op program, and he's an East Penn graduate as of yesterday. He was recognized by Larry Schumacher from Deluxe Plumbing and Heating, and has performed, very well for Mr. Schumacher, and I think he's going on to work with him. So that was quite nice. The Superintendent of Record, which is something that is required at LCTI, with the retirement of Richard Snizak at Parkland, Robert Spengler of Catasauqua School District has been appointed the Superintendent of Record. We did get some good news. We got an additional $100,000 coming our way from the Perkins grants, bringing our total to roughly $1 million for this coming fiscal year. Senior Recognition Night was held virtually on May 27th. If you haven't had a chance to go look at it, it's about a 30-minute clip. It's on their website. It's wonderful. They talked to a number of students, and Mr. Byrd representing East Penn was on for a brief moment, but there are other JOC members as well. speaking highly of the students and the programs up there. Camp LCTI is ongoing there this summer. Registration actually closed, I guess, yesterday, or if the classes are not full, it's still open. But the good news is that as of May 26th, there were 111 students registered, but 1/3 of those are from East Penn, which I thought was great. So whoever's been touting the Camp LCTI, has done a wonderful job. Thank you very much. And finally, they did sign a contract with Structure Advertising for development of a comprehensive marketing strategy for LCTI, refinements to their branding, and also to develop a logo for the 50th anniversary commencement. So that will be forthcoming. That's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Champagne. Are there any questions? Mr. Champagne? Then moving on to announcements, we had an executive session before the meeting today where we discussed negotiations. Our next regular board meeting will be Monday, June 28th, here at 7:30. And I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Meeting's adjourned.